What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Greetings from the Garden State. I'm Mike Ham. We're here at Tamerlaine Sanctuary and Preserve in Montague, New Jersey with Peter Nussbaum. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for having me here. So this is the second time we've done an outdoor episode, but honestly, the first time was not nearly as picturesque as this is. So if you're watching on YouTube, people can see us on YouTube over there. We got the fields, the hills, the trees, the animals. I'm sure we're going to hear some because Dottie's walking around. I don't know where she is right now, but yeah. So tell me, like, where are we? What is this place?
Yeah, so Tamerlaine Sanctuary and Preserve. We're sitting here overlooking our 336-acre sanctuary for rescued farm animals. So we rescue abused, abandoned, neglected geese.
Yep, here are the geese.
Geese, ducks, chickens, goats, cows, pigs, sheep, horses. They all come to us from awful situations.
Yeah.
And their sole job here, once they come live at the sanctuary, this is their forever home. Once they're here, their only job is just to live out their best life. Our job is to give them their best life, and we take that job very seriously.
Yeah.
We have about 250 animals, and we have 15 people on the staff taking care of the animals. We started the sanctuary, and I guess the camera's set up nicely so that I can sort of point this up.
Yeah.
But if you look at that ridge straight over that way,
right
on the other side of it, my wife and I have a house, a farm, much smaller farm, 40-acre farm. And in 2013, my wife called me up at work. I don't do this as an occupation.
Right, I was going to ask about that too, because I know what you do. We'll get into that in a minute. Yeah.
This is a labor of love.
Yeah.
It is business-wise, it's the stupidest thing you could ever do, but it's the most rewarding thing you could ever do.
Right.
So one day she called me up at work in 2013, and she said, "We're adopting 2 roosters." Now, at this point, we had dogs and cats. We loved chickens. We loved all animals. We believe that all animals should be treated, properly and humanely by humans. But I was a little skeptical because we had never cared for chickens before. And she said, "Don't worry, it's going to be great." We had a garden. We were growing all of our own peppers. We make hot sauce. And she said, "We're going to put a little coop in the yard. They're going to be your favorite animals. You just wait." And I was like, all right. So it was the summer. I came up here from my day job on Friday evening, met the 2 roosters. By the next morning, Saturday morning, I went out to the garden where they were hanging out. I was smitten, head over heels in love with these 2 guys, and they quickly became part of the family. So much so, it was such a profound realization for us. So literally within a week, instead of having 2 dog bowls down in our kitchen for breakfast for the dogs, we had 4 bowls down because the dogs and the 2 roosters named Yuri and Jupiter, the 4 of them would eat breakfast together.
Awesome.
They figured out quickly that when we opened up their coop door, where the food was, they'd make a beeline for our kitchen. They were hanging out with the dogs.
Yeah.
And we said, you know what, we got to share this with people. So we started taking in a few more chickens. Before you knew it, we had 200 some odd animals over at our little farm. And then one day my wife called me up at work again, end of 2017, and she said, "There's a for sale sign here." And my reaction to that was like, oh God, here we go. Because I know how my wife thinks, and I know that this is a massive, magical, beautiful, historic property. This house that we're sitting outside of right now was built in 1774. And the family that built this house was here all the way until the 1940s.
Wow.
Same family.
Yeah.
Second family came along in the 1940s. That family was here until we got it. So we're the 3rd owner. And the second family turned this place into a winery.
Okay.
And it was a really cool place because we were right over the ridge. We would take friends here for wine tastings. It was a destination spot up here in Sussex County. And when she said there was a for sale sign, I knew where she was going, and I knew that we had like $25 in the bank, and I was guessing that the asking price was going to be a bit higher than that.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So I said to her, yeah, and she said, "We got to turn that into the sanctuary." And I said, "You're nuts. There's no way." She said, "I'm going to find a foundation to help us."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, you're not. There's no foundation that's going to help us." I was the total pessimist, naysayer, knocking down her dreams of this place.
Yeah.
And she didn't like that too much, and she said, "Watch me." And I should have known right then and there when she said, "Watch me," that we would be occupying this in short order, because she usually is pretty persistent in getting, making dreams happen. If it was up to me, we'd be doing nothing. She found a foundation, and the foundation agreed to help us acquire this property. The second family that had the winery, at this point, there were 6 siblings in their 50s and 60s that owned the property together. They decided to sell. They had another winery down in South Carolina. They decided to consolidate. And even with the help of the foundation, they had offers from other people that were considerably higher than what we could muster up to pay.
Yeah.
And the 6 siblings got together. They came to us and they said, look, we have higher offers from, legitimate bona fide purchasers.
Yeah.
Our mother, and their mother passed away in the 1970s. They said she loved animals so much. She would rescue any animal onto the farm that she could. And in her memory, in her honor, we've decided to leave a lot of money on the table. We want to honor her by having this place become your sanctuary.
Wow.
And so they're still involved in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it was just, we got super lucky. All the stars were aligned and we were able to move over here. So, that's basically the history of the place.
Yeah, which I think is incredible. And you mentioned in that answer also, like a lot of that is there's so much to unpack, which we will get to over the course of this episode. But you mentioned at one point in that answer that this is not your day job. So you're an attorney.
Correct.
By day.
Yeah.
And then a animal saver by afternoon, I guess,
yeah.
right?
This is my second full-time job, although this is a non-paying job.
Right.
So it's my wife's full-time job, again, non-paying. So, again, the business model is crazy. We're the biggest donors to the sanctuary. It's her full-time job for free. It's my second full-time job. We don't have much time for rest or vacation, but that's okay because we're really doing what we love.
Yeah.
And so, like, for example, we're out here. I have the pleasure of talking to you. I've been doing lawyer stuff at our house on the other side of the ridge since 7 o'clock this morning. When we're done showing you around the farm, introducing you to the animals, I'll go back to being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And what's been really nice during COVID, and I hate to say anything has been nice about COVID, but rather than commuting down to the city, I have offices in West Orange and in New York City, and we have an apartment down there. Rather than commuting back and forth, I've been working remote from here, and so I've really gotten to spend a lot more time at the farm without having to, break it up with these big commuting times. So all the commuting time is extra time that I get to spend with people, introducing them to the animals, and spending time with the animals myself.
Yeah, so one of the other things that I thought was interesting about that, too, is that you're talking about how you have this small farm on the other side of this ridge. Mm-hmm. You said it was like 30 acres? 40 acres. 40 acres, which is nothing to sneeze at by any stretch of the imagination, but this is 336, I think you said?
Yeah.
I mean, that is like next level type stuff. And so did you grow up on a farm? Did you have a background in farm, with animals, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's so funny that you ask. So I catch myself when I say 40 acres, small 40-acre farm. I grew up in an apartment in Queens.
Yeah.
When in 2002, we moved out here. It was a weekend place. We were living in New York City. My father was in a nursing home up in Andover in New Jersey, and we were coming up and visiting him a lot. And my wife, who had grown up in New York City, she wanted to get a place out in the country. And when we got that 40-acre place, I'd never seen anything that big. I would walk around pinching myself that we had this farm. Yeah. So I recognize saying a 40-acre farm is small. Comparatively speaking, it's small.
Exactly.
But
compared to this.
It's massive for, Queens apartment boy, that's for sure.
Right. And so, you have this 40-acre farm, and, the two of you, I guess, are, working with the animals. I mean, before you adopted the 2 roosters, did you have a lot of animals on the farm?
None.
Zero.
Except for our dogs.
Except for the dogs.
Dogs and cats.
Yeah, and then eventually you wind up with 200 on that 40-acre farm and then expanded out to this, right?
Correct.
So, just talk to me about the undertaking that is with not a, considerably not a ton of experience working with animals, especially at the level that you're doing right now, and then getting here and then just being like, hey, we're going to go from 200 animals on this small farm to now here, and how many do you have here now?
About 250.
About 250.
Yeah.
So basically, kind of like a transportation type thing over here, right?
Correct. Yeah. We transitioned from that place to this place. Now, so big learning curve, and we did it slowly. We did it gradually. So we didn't have 200 animals in 2013 when we started.
Right.
It took time. By 2017, we had 200 animals, and mostly smaller animals, mostly chickens and ducks and turkeys. I think when we moved over, we had 21 goats, maybe 4 or 5 pigs. We didn't have any cows. We didn't have any horses. So we learned as we went.
Yeah.
we brought in people to help us. We work with all the local farm vets. We hired some people who worked on farms before us, and we learned.
Yeah.
And my wife learned really well. I mean, she has become an authority on care of a particular type of chicken called Cornish cross chickens.
Okay.
And we have remarkable success giving them long, healthy, enriched lives that they don't live anywhere else. So just to give you an idea, and I don't know if you want me to hold off on getting into the specifics of the animals.
Well, yeah. So I think one of the things that would be interesting before we start, before we wrapped up this first segment, is just, you mentioned they come from a lot of, rough situations. Like what are some maybe examples, I guess, of some of these rough, like the type of animal that you're helping here?
Sure. So we rescue the animals from religious rituals, from hoarding situations, from animal agriculture trucks that flip over, leaving the animals, scrambling on the side of the road. From neglect cases, we get calls. We work with humane officers in different towns and counties and prosecutors' offices and the ASPCA and other rescue groups. Farmed animals are very often discarded. There's really no use for them. They're not worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if people can make money off of them, they will. Once they're no longer valuable, there's a lot of need. We have a ton of roosters. Roosters are of no use to anyone. So there's no shortage of animals. We unfortunately have to turn animals away. We get calls every single day to take animals in.
Right. And you know what I think is just so interesting about that too, before we wrap up here, is that this is not just you running a farm. This is like you taking these animals that come from those rough situations that you're talking about. So it's not just like, you have some pigs and then they have babies and then you have more pigs and you just kind of do the whole farming process with those pigs.
Right.
This is like you rescue this pig, and I would imagine some of them are a little bit maybe effed up from some of those situations that they've come from. Is that true too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we rescued one of the first pigs that we rescued, a girl named Clara. She's a potbelly pig, big potbelly pig. We got her from a neglect case where she had been locked in a bathroom for 2 years before we got her.
Holy shit.
And she was a little bit edgy. She's come around. She's super sweetheart now. She's been with us since 2014. We don't use the animals here, so we don't use them. We're not. It would be completely irresponsible for us if we were breeding and making more animals.
To be a sanctuary,
right?
Yeah.
Well, beyond that, I mean, so we don't eat them. We don't use them for food or dairy or eggs. But we neuter all the guys when they come in because we don't want to add to the problem by creating more babies. We do have babies who come in when we rescue a mother with her babies or when we rescue a pregnant mother.
Right.
But, yeah.
No, it's so interesting, and I can't wait to get to more. But we're going to take our first break, quick break here. This is the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. I'm Mike Hamm. We're here at the Tamerlaine Sanctuary and Preserve in Montague, New Jersey with Peter Nussbaum. We'll be right back. It is time for Today in New Jersey History. On January 10th, 1946, the U.S. Army successfully reflected radar signals off the moon. The experiment, called Project Diana after the Roman goddess of the moon, was held at Camp Evans, a part of Fort Monmouth in Wall, New Jersey. And that is Today in New Jersey History. All right, we're back. This is the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. I'm Mike Hamm. We're here at Tamerlaine Sanctuary and Preserve in Montague, New Jersey with Peter Nussbaum. So, Peter, in the first segment, we talked to kind of your background, how it doesn't necessarily exactly coincide with what you're doing now, but you're doing it now. And it's great. And we talked about why it's great and all that kind of stuff. But was this something, you mentioned that you don't use the animals for really anything, milk, eggs, meat, all that kind of stuff, which is great. But also, is that something that has always been the way that you've kind of operated? Or was that something that kind of maybe as you learned more about industries like that was something that you wanted to kind of pursue more?
Yeah, sure. So, my wife and I happen to be vegan, and we're animal rights proponents. That wasn't always the case. We weren't always vegan. We always loved animals. We were always compassionate towards animals.
Sure.
For as long as I can remember, we always went out of our way to buy humanely raised meat and humanely sourced eggs and humanely sourced dairy. That was very important to us. One thing that I tell people about what we're doing here, and so let me back up a second.
Sure.
Our mission here is to rescue and protect and care for abused, abandoned, neglected, exploited farm animals. And a big part of it is bringing people to the farm. So we have a big educational component. We work with schools. We work with We do private tours. We do public tours. We bring people in. And a big goal of ours is to introduce people to animals that are generally only thought of as sources of food.
Yeah.
And for us, there's nothing greater than giving people an opportunity to connect with the animals. 90% of the people that come here aren't vegan. One thing that I know, some certain, fact is that being vegan doesn't make you all of a sudden compassionate towards animals. Everybody's compassionate towards animals.
Yeah.
Everybody loves animals.
Right.
I know firsthand I loved animals every bit as much before I was vegan. And so we're not these people who are bringing here to judge them and proselytize to them
Yeah.
and say you have to be vegan or you're a monster or a bad person or you're not kind to animals. Nothing could be farther from the truth as far as we're concerned. And it's very important for us to introduce people to these animals in a manner that they can make the connection and do whatever they do, whether it's become vegetarian or vegan or think about using animal products a little bit less. Whatever connection they make is fine by us, but we want to give them the outlet to make the connection, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So our mission involves that, but it equally involves conservation and preservation. We care a lot about the planet, the environment, and the wildlife, and what's incredibly important to us is not to screw things up for the animals that have been inhabiting this property for generations by clearing away space for the rescued animals. Good case in point, when we moved over to this property, directly behind you, where your viewers, I don't know if they can see in the camera angle, but there's a big pond back there,
Yeah.
and to us that pond looked like a great spot to bring our 20-some-odd rescued ducks. We quickly realized that there were wild ducks and wild geese that had been occupying and breeding in that pond for generations. And if we had moved our domestic ducks in there, we would have had to make changes. We would have had to put string over all of the tops of the areas that our small animals live in. We do that. It's a great deterrent. It keeps eagles and hawks from swooping in.
Right.
We would have had to put that up over that big pond, and it would have worked. It would have deterred the eagles and the hawks from coming in, but it would also have deterred the wildlife from coming back to their native place, and we would never do that. Same thing, we have 300, now 70-some-odd acres because the two properties touch up on top of the ridge. If we were diabolical, we could say, wow, we could rescue like 10,000 animals. Let's clear cut. We'll clear cut the whole property. We'll make pastures all over the place. We would obviously never do that.
Right.
Putting aside the great expense financially to do all that work, it would be an even greater expense on the environment and on the wildlife. And so we have a real healthy balance here. We're very fortunate to have this property and to have so much cleared pasture already and have such great infrastructure. We do plan to expand. So again, behind you, that way we have 26 acres that 3 cows live on.
Okay.
It's a pretty sweet gig for
sweet
3
gig
cows.
for the 3 cows.
They're amazing cows, and they deserve every bit of it. But we can put some more cows out there with them. And one project that we're in the beginning stages of working on is building a bigger cow barn.
Yeah.
The barn that they live in right now, which people might be able to see back there in the distance, that red barn over there.
Right.
We repurposed that. It was basically a structure built in the 1800s here, and the roof was pretty much collapsed. The walls were dilapidated. It was not usable. The first thing that we did when we got here was we shored that building back up and made it livable for the cows. And again, it's a great spot for the 3 cows. We could do better. So if any of your listeners, viewers want to get involved, there are tons of ways that people can get involved, whether it's coming and volunteering, if any people are good with a hammer. If any people want to donate or sponsor an animal, there are tons of opportunities to get involved.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is also interesting about that is the fact that, so when you were the stuff with the ducks and the geese and putting the string and from deterring from predatory birds and that kind of stuff, it sounds so just common sense now, right?
Yeah.
But maybe when you first got here and started that, was it common sense? Did you have to consult with maybe, I don't know, other farm animal sanctuaries? Because we were talking about my old show, just quick sidebar. I had a woman that runs the Gentle Barn, which is something that's very similar, Ellie Wax. We had her on the show, and that was great. And we talked a lot about some of the similar stuff that she's doing with her. I think she has 3, one in California, one in Nashville, and one in St. Louis or something. Right. Was that something you had to do to try to figure out, what is going to make the best situation for the rescued animals, the wildlife, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we have a whole network of friends. There's a sanctuary network. Just by way of example, this past fall, we rescued 600 some odd chickens from a religious ritual. We weren't going to keep 600 chickens,
sure,
but we have this network of other sanctuaries. These chickens, after we triaged them and got them healthy, they were transported to sanctuaries all over the country. We took in a bunch of pigs 3 years ago from a really horrible situation. These baby piglets were left in a ditch by a guy with a petting zoo who realized that they were all born with a congenital defect. They had a hernia that would have required surgery. This guy didn't want to spend money on the surgery. Rather than euthanizing them, he just left them for dead, no food, no water. We got a call from the county prosecutor. They asked us if we would take them in. We did. We took them all in. We got them healthy, bottle fed them around the clock, got them healthy enough that they could have the surgeries. As they got healthier, we knew that we weren't going to keep these 11 500-pound pigs.
It's a lot of pigs.
And they were tiny when they arrived, but
Yeah.
we knew they would grow to 500-pounders. So we started transporting them to other friends of ours sanctuaries in North Carolina and Georgia and South Jersey. And so, we learn from each other. Again, there's a whole network of sanctuaries, and you learn as you go.
Yeah.
So. Did I know in 2013 about putting string? I mean,
string like
the only thing that I knew how to do on this farm in 2013 was tie my shoes. We really learned as we went. And,
right.
Yeah. And as I said, we rely on veterinarians and other rescuers who have been doing it longer than us.
Yeah.
And
so you have an opportunity to consult with them and, just maybe ask questions because that's obviously a big thing.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So I don't want to dwell on this part of this segment for too long, but the last year and a half obviously has presented a lot of challenges. By the time this episode posts, I think it's going to wind up being close to 2 years. So I always just say year and a half because it just feels okay to say that as opposed to 2 years. A lot of challenges for a lot of different types of businesses, and we've had nonprofits to for-profit businesses, restaurant service, the whole gamut of different types of businesses and places that we've had on this show, and it's obviously affected everybody in different ways. So how has that impacted you? I mean, you talked about how you and your wife are the biggest donors here for the sanctuary and all that kind of stuff, but did that come into play with the stuff that you were dealing with?
Yeah, so COVID was a challenge. It brought some great things. So I'll touch on the positives first.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
one positive of COVID, as I may have mentioned, I got to spend a lot more time here, which was great. So I wasn't commuting to my office. Excellent. Working remote as a lawyer and being close to the animals and close to the farm was truly a blessing for me. Another benefit is through our Zoom educational tours that we started doing, we reached more students in the last year and a half than we reached in the first 7 years of the sanctuary combined. A lot of the students who come visit us at the sanctuary, it's an ordeal, for a school trip to rent the yellow school bus and bring everyone up here for an hour, 2-hour tour. That's a whole day. Now with these Zoom online tours, we introduce people to the animals. We're mic'd up. They get, I won't say exactly the same experience because there's something about, the tactile experience of being able to, touch and smell and hang close with an animal. But again, we reach so many people. The teacher flips the switch and they're with us for an hour. And so that was a beautiful thing. Yeah. So just in terms of reaching people, it was fantastic.
Now, are those things, some of these positives that you're talking about, especially the educational side, are those things that obviously you said that it's could be it's a better experience actually coming here and interacting with the animals themselves, like the kids and everybody that you would have come here. But from the Zoom side, are those things that you think that you may continue in the future? Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, it's just too convenient, and so we would have classes come from the surrounding area and as far away as New York City and Connecticut, Pennsylvania. Now we're hitting classes all over the world, literally, and it's just it's been fantastic. There's no way we're going to stop doing that. Yeah. One of the downsides for us to COVID, unlike my legal profession where it was pretty seamless, we were all able to set up our computers and work from home,
And like most industry, well, there are a lot of industries like the hospitality industry, a lot of my clients who were horrifically impacted, and entertainment industry horrifically impacted. But professionals who sit at a desk, we all quickly realized that you could get everything done, if not as productively, maybe more productively. Here, the animals need to be protected. Our staff had to come in, leaving the animals alone was not in the cards. So we were never able to shut down. We did shut down to visitors.
Yeah.
And we gradually reopened to visitors. First, we had private tours only, where we would have one group of people, and we would check temperatures, and everybody had to establish that they were healthy, and masks all the time for both our staff and for those private tour visitors. We're now back to doing public tours, and because we have the luxury of being outside, it's a little bit better. It's not like we're a theater or an indoor restaurant. But for our staff, it was a real ordeal. We were really concerned that if one staff member got sick with COVID, it could easily spread to the entire staff. And if we lost our staff, we would figure out ways to make it happen. The animals, we weren't going to let them starve or not be cared for. But that was the biggest concern, and thankfully we dodged a bullet. I think from the beginning of COVID through now, we've had maybe 3 employees test positive. Thankfully, nobody got sick or really sick or died. But that was the biggest challenge for us.
Yeah. That's incredible. All right, so we're going to take our second break, our last break of this episode. So this is the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. I'm Mike Ham. We're here at the Tamerlaine Sanctuary and Preserve in Montague, New Jersey with Peter Nussbaum. We'll be right back. It is time for New Jersey Fun Fact of the Day. Did you know that the Hadrosaurus falki, the first nearly complete dinosaur skeleton to be discovered virtually intact anywhere in the world, was unearthed in October 1858 in a marl pit in Haddonfield, New Jersey by William Parker Falk, a member of the prestigious Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia. And that is your New Jersey Fun Fact of the Day. All right, we're back for our last segment of this Greetings from the Garden State podcast episode. I'm Mike Ham. We're here at Tamerlaine Sanctuary in Montague, New Jersey with Peter Nussbaum. So, Peter, we've gone through a lot over the course of this episode so far. We talked about your background, the background of the farm or the sanctuary and the preserve. We've talked about the future plans. We talked about Dottie at some point, who you could hear in the mics, who actually lives in your house, right? You said that? Yeah. Which I think, a fun fact for people that are listening, this is the first I've ever met Peter. We've had some email exchanges, but you just walked out of your car just with a rooster in your arm, which I just thought was just something that you don't normally see.
If any of your listeners, viewers think that's weird, I acknowledge that it is. there's nothing normal about it, but he is.
Right.
He's a part of our family, and
I love that.
He's an elderly rooster that we rescued a long time ago. He doesn't really get along with other roosters. He overmounts hens, and he has balance problems now in his later years. And he was withering, living in our animal care center, our infirmary. And so we decided to bring him home, and that was about a year and a half ago, and he's thriving, doing great, has an excellent appetite. Yeah, and
good crow.
Yep.
Yeah, love that. Awesome. So he's listening in while we're doing this episode, which I think is awesome. But so the last segment that we do for these episodes is always kind of tying it back into the community, because this is a New Jersey-focused podcast. We're highlighting all the great things that the state has to offer, and obviously this is one of those places. That's why we're here. So I think one of the things that we've touched on quite a bit, and we talked about the importance of it, is just the importance of volunteers coming and helping out here, whether it be like physically here at the sanctuary or monetarily or whatever. So talk to me about the obvious importance of that, and how that makes this place go. Sure.
Yeah. So we are located in Montague, New Jersey. For those that don't know, if you look on a map of New Jersey, we're the last town. Yeah. If you look at the triangle up at the northern, northwest corner of the state, the tippy top, we're at that point right on the border with Pennsylvania and New York State. We're next to Port Jervis and Milford and Matamoros, Pennsylvania, right on the Delaware River. It's one of the most agricultural areas in the state. And our community is very important to us. Most of our employees are from the area. Most of our volunteers are from the area. Our employees, typical employee for us is somebody who grew up either living on or working on farms up here. There are a couple of other sanctuaries in the surrounding area, but for the most part, the people who start working here, they've worked on farms where animals were being raised for consumption or to produce milk or eggs. And we have a tremendous amount of respect for our neighbors and for our community. That's very important to us. We invite our community with open arms to come here. And again, it's so important for us not to be judging anyone. We know so many people who are involved in animal agriculture who are great people. You know, there's this misconception, I believe, in the animal rights movement by some that people who work in animal agriculture are people who don't love and care for animals.
Yeah.
That's not true. Most people, families that are involved in animal agriculture, especially up here, they're generational family farms, and they're not exploiting the animals because they're greedy or because they don't like animals. It's what they do. It's what they know how to do.
Sure.
And we have respect for them. And there's a local organization. It's almost like a fraternal order, like a Moose Lodge or an Elks Lodge. I don't know if you've come across any of these in your travels, but it's called the Grange.
Okay.
And different towns have
I've
the
never heard of
Grange.
that.
It's like a VFW. Well,
Okay.
I already said what it's like. So anyway, the local Grange is comprised, you know, it's an older population of people that comprise the members of this Grange. So the Montague Grange, it's in this old historic building, and they meet once a month, and it's sort of like a potluck, and it's, you know, a community-driven thing. They do community service in the area, and they invited us to come speak. Now, these are all agricultural farming families, a lot of them who for generations have been using animals the way that we're trying to rescue animals from.
Sure.
And we went and spoke, and the connection that we made with these people, to the person, they were incredibly inviting. And I think at least a dozen or so of the 50 people that were in the room came up to us afterwards and said, I'm drinking that oat milk. The oat milk's really great. You know, I had a problem. I'm lactose intolerant. Or my niece or my daughter or my granddaughter became vegan, and I tried the food, and it's really good. And, oh, yeah, I love what you guys are doing over there. So I think being attached to the community is really important. Another thing, if God forbid we had a cow, let's say at 3 a.m, a cow goes down, or any animal goes down, and we need help. We love our animal rights friends. We have many in New York City where we're from.
Yeah.
We're not calling them in Williamsburg at 3 a.m. to come help us with that
Come
cow.
to Montague.
We're calling our neighbor who has been involved with cows and dairy their whole life. They'll drop everything. They'll be here at 3 a.m, and they'll do what has to be done to help us get that cow, righted. And knocking on wood, that hasn't happened, but we know that if it were to happen, we can rely on our neighbors.
Yeah, and as I'm sure it probably would go both ways.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And was that something that maybe was a concern at the beginning? Because, the obvious, like what you just talked about, obviously, you were proactive and, tried to at least educate and just kind of put yourselves out there like, hey, we're not saying that everything you're doing is demonic and it needs to be stopped and we're going to take away your livelihood. Mm-hmm. But was that something that maybe, as you started progressing through this process back in 2013, I hope I got the year right.
Yeah.
2013, was that something that you were just like, hey, this might be a problem? Or is that just something that you didn't really, because you've lived here for longer than that, right?
Yeah. Look, I'll tell you, when we first moved here in 2002, we really didn't have ties to the area at all.
Yeah.
And we had some misconceptions that people have. It's a very rural area. We didn't know how we would be received. It's a great community.
Yeah.
There are great people here. I have faith in human beings, whether you have different political beliefs or, religious beliefs, or if you eat animals, or if you're, a staunch animal rights activist. I think the similarities that we all have are stronger than the differences. And I know that sounds hokey, especially after what this country's been through the last bunch of years.
Right.
But I truly believe that up here. And we have all different types of people who come through. And everybody just has a great experience when they come here. And I think we're really inviting and open. And I think that's super important.
Yeah. And talk to me also about the education side of it, because we talked a little bit about the Zoom education classes that you guys would do. The education side of it, are there programs, you talked about the tours, so people could come here, take a tour, kind of learn, but talk to me more about the educational side of it, what you're trying to connect with those people that come and take those classes.
Yeah, so we are providing humane education, essentially, and it depends upon the audience. So we're not going to be throwing harsh humane education stuff at second graders,
Sure.
and third graders.
Right. Yeah.
But we're explaining to people who really don't have a connection with the food that they're eating, where it comes from. People don't understand how animal agriculture works on large scale. They don't understand the horrible lives that the animals in animal agriculture live. They don't understand the severe impact that it's having on the environment. And so we want to give people an opportunity to understand that. Also, people don't really have an opportunity to see pigs other than the happy, smiling pig in a commercial for bacon or ham or on the side of a truck.
Yeah.
They don't understand the life of dairy cows. And we explain it all to people, again, in a non-judgmental way.
Sure.
But I think we're doing our job well because people make the connection when they come here.
Yeah.
And not to scare people off, but a lot of people that come with no intention of changing the way that they're, interacting with animals that are used for food. A lot of people, after a visit, they reach out to us a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years later and say, hey, that tour was life-changing and I've been vegan ever since, or I've been vegetarian, or I gave up this or I gave up that. And again, that's not the reason why we're doing it. We're not doing it to proselytize, but it just sort of happens by osmosis, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So it also goes beyond just the sanctuary here, because we have the hot sauce. This is an
yes.
award-winning hot sauce, right?
It is indeed.
Yeah, we're going to hold it up for the camera so people can see. So if you're not watching on YouTube, you can't see it. But talk to me about this. Like, what did you, just be like, hey, let's make a hot sauce?
Yeah, so it's funny. The peppers for the hot sauce were really the impetus for us to rescue those first 2 roosters.
Yeah.
So without hot peppers and without hot sauce, there's no sanctuary. We started growing peppers. We were trying to grow our own vegetables before there was any thought. And that first, when was it? So, yeah, it might have been that first summer when we first adopted the 2 chickens and then took in a few more animals. We had an excess of peppers. My wife decided to cook it up into hot sauce. Someone recommended, hey, and we were giving it away as gifts. Someone recommended, why don't you go to the local farmer's market, set up a table. It'll be great outreach for your fledgling sanctuary.
Yeah.
If you can not just put up a banner with some literature, if you could feed them, people like to be fed. So we put chips out and hot sauce, and it was a great starter with people.
Right.
And it grew from that to the point where the last cook that we did, I think, was 17,000 bottles.
Holy
We
moly.
sell in a bunch of stores.
Yeah.
We do a lot of festivals. We do hot sauce festivals down at the Sussex County Fairground.
Sure. Yep.
The New Jersey Taco Festival.
Yep, into that one.
We're going to be at New Jersey Veg Fest this coming weekend. And the hot sauce really took on a life of its own. We have 3 flavors. This flavor right here is called Artie's Bourbon Blend.
Okay.
And it's named after the first pig that we rescued, Artie,
Nice.
who still lives at the farm. He's been with us since 2014. The hot sauce is great. And if anyone comes here to visit, they leave with hot sauce.
Awesome.
We sell it, but we gift it to all of our visitors. And so whether you like hot sauce or not, you come here, you leave them with hot sauce. And we have no problems with your regifting.
Yeah. And then maybe this could be like a softball way to ask this question, but do proceeds from the hot sauce go back into the farm?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So all of the money that we raise from the hot sauce, every last penny goes into the farm and caring for the animals, and it's donated to the animals. The only money that doesn't go in is the money that we pay to our co-packer to make it. So, the hard costs.
Yep.
But 100% of the profits.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
All right, so if people are listening to this episode and they're like, wow, I got to get up to Montague, wherever the hell that is, and I got to visit the Tamerlaine Sanctuary, I got to, meet Peter, meet his wife, meet the animals, meet all that kind of stuff, like, where can they go to do that?
Yeah. So check out our website or our social media. It's tamerlaine.org, and it's TAMERLAINE. .org. I'm guessing you have like the high-tech stuff where people can actually see that on a screen, so I don't have to...
Right, we will link it.
I don't have to spell for your people.
No, we're good.
We have stuff there and on Facebook and on Instagram and all the other stuff that the kids use these days.
Yeah.
And
crazy kids.
Yeah, the crazy kids. And we do the tours. We're winding down for the season with our public tours, but during the spring, summer, and fall, we do public tours every Saturday and Sunday, and we do private tours every day of the week, every week of the year. So we go straight through. If there isn't a blizzard and people want to come and do a private tour, they can book one. We also do weddings here in this magical 1774 7-bedroom farmhouse.
Yeah, love that.
We also rent out the house to groups. It's not a bed and breakfast, but if someone wanted to do a family reunion and take on the whole house, that's an option. A lot of cool stuff happens here.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I've been following the Instagram, and that's always cool because you get to meet the animals that way. Are there ways that people can get involved? And I think we already talked about this over the course of the episode. Let's say they live in Cape May. Mm-hmm. How can they get involved without actually driving? I don't even know how long it would take to drive to Cape May from here, like 4 hours.
We have people who come up. One of our workers is an amazing guitarist. He's in a local jam band, and he also has gigs down in Cape May.
Awesome.
He's down there, I think, at least once a week playing, and then he
comes back up
schleps
here.
back up and works the shift the next morning.
Yeah.
So I think I've asked him. I think it's about 3 and change.
Yeah.
Well, they can come up, and people do come up, but not to be evasive with your answering your question.
Yeah.
There are lots of ways that people can get involved online. You can support us, you can donate, you can follow our social media, you can if you have kids, you can get their school, their teachers involved with us to do a humane tour. But I will say that getting up here is great.
Yeah.
And, one thing about this great state that I love so much is that it's not that big.
Right.
And so even if you're in Cape May, you come on up and meet the animals. Nothing beats that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I'm excited to take the tour here in a minute. My mom just got here. Hey, Mom. My girlfriend's sitting over there, too. They're excited to take the tour as well. That's why they're here. I'll make sure that I put those links, the Instagram handle, all that kind of stuff in the show notes for everybody listening. Peter, thank you so much for having us
Thank you so
here
much
today.
for doing this.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited that we were able to come up here and shout out Paula Bruckner for making the intro.
Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's going to wrap up this episode. So I'm Mike Ham. This has been the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. We were here at Tamerlaine Sanctuary in Montague, New Jersey with Peter Nussbaum. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.